So you all have seen my Tacoma, but have you seen the latest thing I've gotten myself into? A 2024 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro in the Pro exclusive color Terra. I wish. Or maybe some of you who are loyal and stout viewers of my channel are glad to hear that this isn't my Tacoma's replacement, possibly. Anyways, this is not my 4Runner, unfortunately. It is owned by Toyota, but I do have it for a week. And here's the thing. All I drive is my Tacoma. I mean, I also drive my Land Cruiser too, but 99% of the time, it's my Tacoma. And I think a lot of people think that this is just the SUV version of the Tacoma, which it totally is, but the two may be more different than you think. This generation 4Runner has been around since 2009, 2010-ish, so it's on a 15-year run, which means there's no shortage of information about it, especially here on YouTube. But what I wanted to know is if you've ever considered going from a Tacoma, specifically this generation, which is the most comparable to this 2024 4Runner, what is it like? I've said it before, but I will be purchasing a new vehicle in 2024, so will this be it? I think there's a decent number of you folks who have had this question for yourself: should I get a Tacoma or 4Runner? And also, with the potential redesign of this vehicle on the horizon, this one might be worth snagging up because we all know it's a proven SUV if you're looking for something reliable and for the long haul. But let's do everything I normally do in a week with my truck with this SUV instead to see, coming from a Tacoma, what to expect with a 4Runner. And for me, that means some off-road therapy. Yes, I know going to the desert isn't an everyday use case for a 4Runner, but it's something I and a lot of other people like to do in our Toyotas. You know, I consider myself a very general needs, everyday average vehicle owner, if that makes any sense. But basically what I mean by that is I don't need to do any super extreme off-roading, but I still want to get out here and have fun on the dirt like what I'm doing today. So I want a vehicle that at least has the bones to be capable to do stuff like this, but at the same time, I don't want something that's going to be super uncomfortable or give me a really bad on-road driving experience. I don't need anything super plush, but I got my 9 to 5 I go to every single day, and you've got to get to the trails driving somehow, right? So I want to maintain that decent on-road experience. Hopefully 4Runner supports all that. So far I'm having a ton of fun in the dirt, and I'm going to focus on that right now because we got some fun little stuff to do today. Being out here in the desert and in this sort of terrain, ground clearance really isn't a huge issue, although I'll say that, to be fair, this vehicle from the factory has a decent amount, and it's also got pretty good approach and departure angles compared to my Tacoma, but of course that's because it's got naturally a shorter wheelbase. So what I'm really interested in here is how the suspension feels. Woo! Oh man, it's just soaking up these little whoops. I mean, we're not going over anything too treacherous, but it's doing a surprisingly good job. I was afraid it was going to be too soft, and it definitely does not feel as stiff as my truck. That is the biggest thing for sure. But despite being designed to feel pretty comfortable on road as well, it's doing a great job out here. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that being a Pro, you get these upgraded Fox internal bypass shocks that are bigger. But wider internal bypass Fox shocks are also standard on the 3rd gen Tacoma TRD Pro. So, do the two ride the same? In my opinion, not really. The rear end of the 4Runner felt quite different than the rear end of my Tacoma, and a big part of that is just because the suspension design is completely different. Under here in the rear of the 4Runner, you have a linked suspension. You know, leaf springs tend to be really stiff, and the good thing about leaf springs is they're great at holding up weight, but the coils just feel so much better. I think they help to just soften those hits overall. As you can see, I kept things pretty mild out here because keep in mind, this isn't my vehicle and I want to be extra careful with it, but I'm already impressed with the 4Runner in its stock form, especially the suspension. But more fun was to be had at Blow Sand Hill, which, as the name implies, is this giant hill of soft sand because of how the desert winds blow. My Tacoma's made it up here before, so it was time to try out the 4Runner TRD Pro. This 4Runner has a different tire setup, but let's see if we can make it up. Hopefully we don't get stuck. Blow sand in many ways is a test of the tires, which this 4Runner came with Nitto Terra grapplers in the size 265/70 R17, so let's see how they do after taking about 10 psi out. At the top, I did get stuck a few times. But just before it got too dark out there, I changed my technique by engaging 4 low, limiting it to second gear, and I made it up. The best feeling ever. I wish I was able to catch these UTV guys' reactions because they thought it was cool 4Runner was up here. I think Blow Sand shows that this 4Runner is more than capable, just like my Tacoma, for anything me and most people would want to do in the sand. It's definitely a blast. Even though again, in my opinion, the two have distinct feels with the 4Runner riding significantly softer. But no matter your preference, both are great off the pavement. Now, those few times I got stuck up in the sand, thankfully, I didn't need any recovery gear because I could just roll back. But I always make sure my Tacoma is packed with anything I might need. And being a truck, there's obviously way more room to store gear compared to the 4Runner. Also, recovery gear tends to get dirty, so I prefer keeping it in a truck bed. In the 4Runner for the most part, things have to be stored inside. Unless yours, like this Pro, has the TRD roof rack. You can see that this 4Runner came with a pretty nice roof rack. This is the OEM Toyota one. So yeah, you can mount some stuff up here too, like these new deco cases I got from Decked. Although, this is clearly for demonstration because do you see what I see here? Gotta love this garage. Okay, no real shade to my garage, but being able to haul stuff opens up the topic of truck versus SUV in general, bed versus no bed. One of the big reasons people pick Tacoma versus 4Runner is one can haul stuff, the other is better at hauling people. Again, I don't want to really dwell on this topic because it's a pretty obvious big difference between these two, and it's like, if you're a pool guy or you have a profession where you like 100% need a bed, then get a Tacoma. Even if you like everything else about the 4Runner better. For me though, I can theoretically do either, but when it comes to storing my off-road recovery gear, my Tacoma is just so much easier. So the Tacoma wins there for me, but the 4Runner definitely takes the crown on backseat passenger space. So there's no third row in this TRD Pro. Wow, say that 3 times fast. I messed that line up so many times. But the second row here is so comfy, especially if you're used to the Tacoma like me. Having this much legroom feels like luxury. Like in the Tacoma, you're in basic economy. This 4Runner, you're flying business class. Oh wow, look at this too. There are 2 USB-C chargers back here for your passengers. 2 backseat pockets too, like one behind each seat. Like I specifically remember my Tacoma did not have that. I had no idea why, but man, I could get used to this. I do not have children, but if you do, this setup is so much better. Also, there's vents back here too. My Tacoma doesn't have that. Overall, just a nice, comfortable backseat experience. I might sound like I'm exaggerating here, but coming from a Tacoma, these little things make a difference and you notice them. But let's be real, most of the time, I'm not gonna be back here. I'm gonna be sitting in the driver's seat. Okay, so as promised, we are doing everything I normally do in a week with my Tacoma with this 4Runner instead. And unfortunately, it's no longer the weekend, so I'm not heading out to another trail. It is a weekday, so I am on my way to my 9 to 5 grind. But a girl can't be too upset because daily driving a 4Runner TRD Pro is pretty awesome. The second you start driving a 4Runner, you start to realize how many other 4Runners there are on the roads, at least here in California. I don't think I've seen another Terra 4Runner, and again, this is an exclusive color for the TRD Pro for 2024, but it's definitely a head turner. I think people can't decide whether it's orange or brown. It depends on the way the light hits it. Either way, totally unique. This really being my first time behind the wheel of a 5th gen 4Runner, I was pretty curious about how it's going to behave on big hills. Specifically like the acceleration, the throttle mapping, all those sort of drivability aspects. And the reason being, many 3rd gen Tacoma owners are in agreement about something. You see, as much as they love their trucks, some people report them gear chasing on inclines and being a little laggy at the pedal. And that's why a lot of people, like myself even, have turned to a tune. I have the Overland Torque tune on my Tacoma, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, check out my tuning playlist. From what I can tell, the 4Runner doesn't really seem to exhibit any of those same symptoms as the Tacoma does. Yeah, like no lag, no gear hunting, odd shift patterns, going up hills. Just drives like butter. And what I said in the desert earlier about the suspension feeling softer definitely applies out here on the pavement too. So at least on the streets of San Diego here, 4Runner, no question, is a lot smoother. I could see it being preferable as a daily driver because of this over the Tacoma. And smooth is nice, but I think being so soft also comes with a lot more body roll when you're going around turns, and also when you're coming to a stop, a little bit more nosedive too. Still getting a little used to that. So, through driving a Tacoma day in and out, I find that the front dash and all the controls are pretty simplistic and basic, yet very practical. And thankfully, that's also the case in the 2024 4Runner. So everything we do have here is pretty similar to the Tacoma, it's just laid out in a different location, so my brain has definitely been thrown for a loop, because it's like same controls, but I've been pressing different buttons. The touchscreen radio is identical to what they have in the Tacoma. For CarPlay, like you see up here, you do have to plug in your phone to the USB. What's also pretty much the same is this center display in your dash. And it's got all the same information that the Tacoma does, but the Tacoma one looks a little bit more modern and sporty. The window switches are a little bit high, so that took some getting used to. What I do like though is that this transfer case control is here, and I like that better than the Tacoma's, which is a knob that's near the climate control knob. So there's been a couple times where I've had some accidental engaging of 4 high. Not a problem in here. Steering wheel controls are all the exact same as what's in my Tacoma, and something I like to mention every time I'm talking about the steering wheel is this button over here. When you're in the adaptive cruise control mode and you get behind someone, the vehicle will give you a certain amount of distance between you and the person in front of you. However, by default, that amount of space is pretty large, so there's actually multiple settings to where you can make the following distance a little bit closer, and the vehicle will close the gap a little bit, which is nice so that other people don't cut in front of you because of the long distance. So there's my little tidbit about cruise control in Toyotas if you don't know. And also, if you didn't know, here's a little trick for the 360 camera setup. Also, as I'm looking at this, I really wish the bird's eye view was the same color as the vehicle, so let's see what we can do about that. Doing a few little tricks here. You can look this up if you're curious. Oh, they don't have a Terra or an orange, but I think red's the closest color. So now when I hit the camera, it's a little bit better. All party tricks aside, the one upgrade I could not get enough of in this vehicle was the audio. So it's a JBL audio system, and there are 15 speakers, a sub, and I'll be the first to say I am not an audiophile by any means, but I just love listening to music in here. Like, to the point where every single night I have just gone in the garage to sit in this vehicle to just go through my music and play everything. So I have a lot of classic rock stuff that sounds pretty good, and my 90s rap like Eminem and Jay-Z also are good. You know, I could always go for a little more bass, but jazzy type of music like Michael Bublé, Frank Sinatra, chef's kisses, it just becomes such a vibe in here. I know that's such a weird spread of music, but all I'm trying to say is, like, anything you play in here, music, podcast, it all sounds good. Now, speaking of sound, here's the thing with off-road vehicles. They are not notoriously quiet, which, to be honest, I don't mind, because when you're actually off-roading, hearing can be an important part of the experience. And I do like hearing the throaty growl and the rumble of the TRD exhaust from inside the cab of the 4Runner. But overall, for an off-road vehicle, I would say the in-cab noise isn't too bad. And I'm pretty impressed because, again, with those Nitto Terra grapplers, they're a pretty decent size. I mean, I'm used to driving a C-Low rated tire, which is heavier than those LTs. But for what you get, I mean, those tires made it up Blow Sand Hill, right? The trade-off is not bad at all. There's so much more I loved about this 4Runner, like the fact that it had remote start, which was nice because it was cold and rainy this week. And how good the LED headlights and fog lights performed, to how it was so much easier to fit it in my garage because it's much shorter than my Tacoma. I love my Tacoma, and you guys know it's not going anywhere, but in so many ways, it's hard not to love a 2024 TRD Pro 4Runner just as much. Kind of bringing everything together and comparing the two generally again, besides obvious things like bed, no bed, lots of legroom, no rear legroom. I think the 4Runner in general is very similar to the Tacoma, just a little bit more refined. I do not want to insinuate in any way that I now dislike my Tacoma because I feel like the 4Runner is more refined. I'm very aware the two vehicles just have different use cases. And these two vehicles obviously target two different kind of customers, but you might be someone who, kind of like me, sort of falls into both. So I don't know, I definitely want one, that is not the question, but I think it'll also be really interesting to see what they do with the redesign whenever that ends up happening. Maybe they'll keep the naturally aspirated V6, or they'll go the Tacoma redesign route with a Turbo 4 or Turbo 4 hybrid option. A lot of people say the 4Runner is long due for a redesign, so I could very well see this as a possibility in 2025. But what I do know is that whatever's behind me right now, like my Tacoma, is a really awesome vehicle. So my plans for 2024 is to either snag up one of these, or hopefully I can get my hands on a 4th generation Tacoma, the redesigned one. I am still keeping my silver truck for those of you who are curious too, but so far sourcing a 2024 Tacoma has been a little bit difficult, which is why a 2024 4Runner may be in my cards. But let me know what you guys think, and I'm curious, so what do you out there drive? Are you a Tacoma owner, 4Runner owner, both? Do you generally agree with my assessment of the 4Runner? Anyways, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Toyota for loaning me this 4Runner for the week. It definitely was really fun. It's always great for me to try new things, and if their plan was for me to want one of these so badly alongside my Tacoma, it definitely was working. I'm kidding, but also partially not. Everything I said in this video was my true thoughts and reactions, and they didn't tell me to say anything. Just overall, as a Tacoma owner, I'm pretty stoked about the 4Runner. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to connect more with me, you can follow me on my Instagram. It is at ChloeKuo. I post more in real time on there. But other than that, let me know if you guys want me to try out other Toyotas or other vehicles for a week and see how it compares specifically to my Tacoma. And yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I hope I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.